Okay, so this is a video of me going over just a brief walkthrough of the continent of Europe and various different countries and capitals and other sorts of items that one would need to know. This is a rather familiar continent, probably the most familiar continent for most people outside of the North American one. And so I will probably, due to the amount of countries and detail and rich history, etc., probably break this up into two videos. But this is only a starting point, and if this is your area of the world that you are responsible for, I encourage you to go more in depth on most of these places. So I'm going to actually start down here in the Iberian Peninsula, and so let's go ahead and begin. So, as you can see, this peninsula, occupied by the countries of Portugal with its capital Lisbon and Spain with its capital of Madrid, is actually the Iberian Peninsula or the Celtiberian Peninsula, and you can see it listed right here. Let's talk about Portugal for a second. Lisbon is noted for its earthquake that occurred in 1755. Literature-wise, the only author I can actually name that comes from Portugal is Saramago, who had, of course, the work blindness, as it were. And the peninsula's major river that goes both through, of course, Lisbon and into Spain is that, obviously, of the Tagus. Moving on to Spain, as it were, in Madrid, you will find the Prado, which is, of course, a museum that is world-class with lots of various different works by Spanish artists and otherwise. Also a museum in Bilbao, you can see up here, which is, of course, the Guggenheim in Bilbao, designed by Frank Gehry. Nevertheless, down here you can see Gibraltar, which is obviously, as is indicated, occupied by the UK, and they speak a version of English down there called Rock English, as it were. Cadiz is right here, where, of course, the Battle of Trafalgar between Lord Horatio Nelson and the forces of the Allied French under Admiral Villeneuve were defeated at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. Moving along, and there's so much more that I could say about Spain all the way back to the Roman times, but be aware of the various different areas like Aragon and Castilla, those sorts of things like that. But moving along over here to Barcelona, named after Hamilcar Barca, the Carthaginian, who after the completion of the First Punic War had moved his resources, bringing his son Hannibal, and there's, of course, the city named after him. Barcelona is noted for a salamander statue. You should go and check it out. It comes up a lot in Quiz Bowl, as with Barcelona being the answer line, and of course the famous Sagrada Familia, which has been a cathedral being built over the last 100 years, still not completed, but Gaudi, the architect, long dead. You also have the Ebro River that, of course, played a major role in the times of the ancient Romans and the Carthaginians in those Punic Wars. Please be familiar with things like Catalonia, which of course is this area, the Basques, separatists, and other sorts of things like that. Now you have here the Bay of Biscay, which is between France and Spain. And then, of course, dividing Spain and France is the Pyrenees Mountains that you can see right here. In the Pyrenees Mountains, we can zoom in a little bit, you can see that there is the country Andorra. So it's sandwiched in between France and Spain that you can see there, but please be familiar with the Pyrenees. Down here at the bottom, you see the Balearic Islands. Back in the ancient Roman days, they were noted for their slingers, those that, of course, employed slingshots. So you have Mallorca and Minorca, and then, of course, a popular destination, Ibiza, off to the west of those two main islands, the bigger one, the smaller one, as it were. So let's zoom back out, and now moving on into France. So France, as you can see here, has as its capital Paris on the Seine River, and the, of course, island in the Seine River, you'll find Notre Dame Cathedral. You have the great Eiffel Tower, built for the 1889 World Exposition, the Second World's Fair, following the 1851 World's Fair in, of course, London. Nevertheless, please note the Rhone River that is down here, the Rhone River Valley, that comes out of the Alps. Just the other day, there was a question, and the Alps, as you can see here, the major, largest mountain range in Europe, it talked about how the Rhone River began in the Alps. In the Alps, please be aware moving, as you can see, from France and Italy and Switzerland into Vienna, or I should not say Vienna, but Austria. You have Mount Blanc, the tallest mountain, the White Mountain in all of the Alps, and of course the Matterhorn, famed for people trying to obviously climb it as well. You have the Loire River that is there going from Nantes and the Edict of Nantes. Of course, there's so much history behind all of these countries, but I can't get into them due to the fact that we are limited by time. And down here on the southern coast, this is known as the Riviera, where you find Marseille, which, of course, in the ancient Roman world was known as Massilia. But you also have Avignon. Please note the Avignon papacy, that in the 14th century, there was two popes, the Pope in Rome and then the other Pope in Avignon, both claiming the major legitimacy. It's often known as the Babylonian captivity of the papacy. Nevertheless, moving up into the north, up here, of course, you have the area known as Normandy, with, of course, the Norman invasion of England in 1066, with, of course, William the Conqueror, and also you have, it is the location of the Allied invasion of D-Day on June 6, 1944. So much more that I could say about France, but we have to obviously move on. So I'll go north and take a look at the United Kingdom. So the United Kingdom is made up of the constituent countries of England, which is what you have right here, Wales, which is this area right over here to the left, with, of course, Cardiff being the quasi-capital of Wales. You have then to the north of England, Scotland, and the Forth of Firth being one of the little inlets that is going to mark one of the beginnings or termini of the, of course, Hadrian's Wall, built to keep out the Scots, the Picts, known as the Caledonii at that time. London, of course, is on the Thames River that you can see here, but there are other places to know. You have Portsmouth, which, of course, and Plymouth, where the Pilgrims, of course, set sail in the early 1600s to Plymouth Rock on modern-day Massachusetts. Birmingham, noted for its production of steel, which is why Birmingham, Alabama, of course, shares its name. Manchester, Liverpool, and all of these other important cities as well. Of course, you have somewhere around in here, you have the Stratford upon Avon, which is the home of William Shakespeare. Please take note of, obviously, as well, also the two great universities, Oxford and Cambridge, that are there. Moving up into Scotland, you have Edinburgh and Glasgow, Edinburgh being the capital of Scotland. And, of course, to the north of the Scottish coastline. Please note the Hebrides. Like, for example, you have the Hebrides Overture by I forget, it might be Mendelssohn. I could get that wrong. I'm sorry if it is. The Orkney Islands, the Shetland Islands, as it were, and so forth and so on. Now, moving over to this area here, this is the Irish Sea. And if you can look at the little place that is in here, that is the Isle of Man. The final kingdom, or the final country of the United Kingdom is, of course, that of Northern Ireland, Ulster, with its capital at Belfast. And, of course, all kinds of things to know concerning the Troubles and like. Ireland, as a, of course, country that is here, has its capital at Dublin. So please be aware of all the sorts of things that one can know. I mean, there's the Irish potato famine of the mid-19th century, the Corn Laws, which went into it, the, of course, Uprising 1916, Easter Uprising, and Irish Home Rule, all kinds of things to note for, obviously, that with a rich, rich history. So let's go ahead and move on into what is known as Scandinavia. And so Scandinavia is a group of countries that share somewhat geography and culture, and they would be the countries of Denmark, which you can see right here, Iceland, which is over here, Norway, Sweden, and Finland, although Finland is a bit different culturally comparative to the other four Scandinavian countries. But first, let's talk about Iceland, noted for its fantastic, and I don't mean good fantastic, but more like, wow, volcanic activity. Its capital is Reykjavik, and of course it's noted for its glaciers as well as other sorts of various different things of note and import and so forth and so on. It also is the home to one of the oldest, if not it's claimed to be the oldest parliament, known as the Althing, so that comes up quite a bit as well. We move over to Norway. and Sweden. Longtime rivals are they both. Capital of Norway is Oslo. It is the place where they hand out the Nobel Peace Prize. All other Nobel Prizes are handed out in Stockholm because Alfred Nobel, that inventor of dynamite and the namesake of the Nobel Prizes that he, of course, had given the financial resources for, was a Swede himself. But nevertheless, in Stockholm, also the namesake of the Stockholm Syndrome, which is a type of incident in which someone who is captured or kidnapped turns out into, over time, of favoring and helping their own captors. So, of course, that's called the Stockholm Syndrome. You have, in between the United Kingdom and the area of here, the Scandinavia, the North Sea, which is there. That is where the Rhine River flows into. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then, of course, on the Jutland Peninsula that you see here, we have Denmark with its capital at Copenhagen, or Copenhagen if you would like, with, of course, the island of Zealand, hence why there in the South Pacific you end up with New Zealand. For Norway, please be aware of the various different fjords that were these deep cut-in kind of ravines all along the coastline due to glacial activity and the like. And then separating Finland from Sweden is the Gulf of Bothnia that you see right here. And to the south, obviously, you have the Baltic Sea, which in a moment we'll get to the Baltic states that you see here. Nevertheless, Finland has as its capital Helsinki, Lapland with the indigenous people. You got to know these indigenous people. The Sami are up here as well. To be noted, Finland just recently, as this is made on mid-July 2023, admitted into the NATO, along with Sweden, but nevertheless, capital there at Helsinki with your Gulf of Finland that is here. Please note Lake Ladoga often is a clue when St. Petersburg in Russia is your answer line. So we continue and move on, and I'm going to now go to the Low Countries. And like I said, this is probably going to be split up into two parts. So you have here the Low Countries, so called because of their basic topography geographically. They are not very great with their altitude comparatively relative to the sea level, as it were. You have Belgium with its capital of Brussels. Excuse me. And that is essentially where the headquarters of the EU are located. But, of course, played quite a role in the World War I with the Schlieffen Plan to be coming from Germany through Belgium into France, and then as well later on all along the coast, or not coast, but the line of France. You have the Maginot Line from World War I to be noted as well. Also, Belgium is the locale for the Battle of Waterloo. And then, of course, you have the Netherlands, which, of course, has not only the great capital of Amsterdam, but also The Hague, where you find the international court. Rotterdam, go look that up about The Hague. Just quickly do a Wikipedia. And Rotterdam, which I think is the home of Erasmus, the great 16th century humanist and thinker, as it were. But nevertheless, please be familiar with Wallonia and the Walloons, as well as, of course, the Flemish and those ethnic groups that you find in the area of the Low Countries, which are there. Right below Belgium, sandwiched in between France, Belgium, and Germany, is Luxembourg. Often it's referred to as the only Grand Duchy, with its capital at Luxembourg as well. Moving on to Switzerland. So essentially, I hope to get through Western Europe, which will include Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and Austria, and then we'll make another one for the concentration on Eastern Europe. Switzerland, which in the ancient world was known as the Helvetia or Helvetia, has, of course, its capital at Bern. It is divided into cantons, so that's always something worthwhile to know. Noted for its banking industry, which is rather secretive. You have headquarters in Zurich and Geneva, Geneva being the home of the, of course, Geneva Conventions, which are the basic rules of war put forth at the conclusion of World War I, making it where you can kill people a little bit more humanely. Great ironic that is there. Geneva, back in the ancient world, was known as Geneva or Geneva, and then it gave its name to this lake that is here, which is Lake Geneva. Used to be known by a different name. Lake Leman, but now it is named after the city which is at the western end of it, as it were. Also in Switzerland, be aware of Lucerne. That is, of course, a very also famous lake that one needs to know. So let's go south and hit up Italy really quickly with its rich history before we move on. Oh, also, Liechtenstein, another teeny tiny little bitty country, of course, right there above the P that you can see sandwiched in between Switzerland and Italy and Austria that is there. So, of course, when it comes to Italy, you have the northern part, which is dominated by the very industrious city of Milan, and they resent the south. They feel as though the south is living off of their own like welfare, that they're the ones producing the economic boom that one sees for Italy, and then the south is dragging them down economically. You have the Po River, known as the Padus in the ancient world, the longest in all of Italy. You have, of course, Torino or Turin, where the 2004 Winter Olympics were held, but also the home of the Shroud of Turin, which supposedly was the garment or the cloth set on Christ, and they house it at Turin that is there. Genoa, which is the home of course, Christopher Columbus. And all of the regions that you have, like, for example, you have Liguria, which is up here, and Lombardy, and these are places and to know. So make sure you're somewhat familiar with your regions of Italy. Important, like Tuscany right here, where, of course, Florence and Pisa with its leaning towers is always famously known. And, of course, so much to know for Florence concerning the Renaissance and so forth and so on. But to stay in the north for a moment, Verona, which is the home, of course, of Romeo and Juliet, as well as the home of Catullus, the great Roman poet. Venice, which is over here on the Adriatic Sea. So, of course, Italy is surrounded by three seas, arms, as it were, of the Mediterranean. You have the Tyrrhenian, which is locked in between Corsica, which is a French place, the home of birthplace of Napoleon. Elba, where Napoleon was at one time exiled. You have Sardinia, which is, of course, controlled by Italy, and of course Sicily down here, forming the Tyrrhenian Sea borders along with the western coast of Italy. The Adriatic on the other side, with Venice being the jewel of the Adriatic. We all know that they were ruled historically, Venice, by doges. D-O-G-E is the name of the ruler of Venice. So much other things you can talk about with Venice. Painters like Tintoretto and, of course, Titian. Composers come from there as well, to be noted. Like, for example, I think Vivaldi was from Venice, and its canal system, as it were. San Marino, also very important as a city, not city, but really a city-state, a country in and of itself contained within Italy, just like Vatican City, which you can see right here. It fancies itself as the most serene republic along the Adriatic, that, of course, is right here. Now, going down here, of course, to the south of Italy, you have Sicily down here with Mount Etna, along with Vesuvius, both active volcanoes, Etna being the tallest volcano in all of Europe, and its capital of Sicily being that of Syracuse, which is not listed on here, which is odd. Malta is right below it as well. Malta very often comes up as a quiz ball answer line. Its capital, that is Valletta. Of course, Italy's capital is that of Rome, along the Tiber River. So much more that we could talk about. The kingdom of the two Sicilies, including the area here and here. The, of course, unification of Italy with Garibaldi. In the late 18th century, or not 18th century, but the late 19th century, Count Cavour, and all kinds of other things to be noted, as well as to go into such a rich literary background. You have Dante, you have Boccaccio, you have Petrarch, you have modern authors like Umberto Eco. You should be familiar with them all. Go and look up your Italian authors that come up in Italy. Pirandello. I could just keep going on and on and on. But we don't have time, so we need to move up into Austria and into Germany. So really quickly, Austria, that you can see here. Capital of Vienna, one of many, many capitals on the Danube River. The Danube is the second longest river in all of Europe, and the only one that is, I should say, if you don't call the Volga River, which is over here in Russia, is actually the longest, but it's the Russian version of course, Europe. And so therefore we don't want to downplay the nature of the Danube, but it is of course, flowing through many countries or capitals, including that of Vienna. Austria, of course, the home of Mozart, the birthplace of actual Hitler as well. So lots to be known here. The Austrian-Hungary Empire, Hungary over here, Austria over here, Innsbruck, Austria, Salzburg, the home of Mozart, as well as many other things to be known for Austria. They speak Germany in Austria, or they speak German, I should say, in Austria. So we move on to Germany, and this will be the last one for this installment of Europe. Like I said, trying to break it into two. Lots of rivers to be noted. You have the Rhine River, which essentially forms the border between France and Germany before it empties out into the North Sea that you can see up here. Lots of important cities. When Germany was divided into Eastern and Western Germany, East Germany often an answer line. East Germany, they like to ask about Erich Honecker, its ruler, the Stasi, its secret police, and of course the Berlin being divided into East and West Berlin. But the capital of West Germany was actually Bonn, that you can see over here. And there's the city of Cologne, which is rather important. Hanover, which gives its name to the rulers of the UK in the 18th and 19th centuries. All the Georges were Hanoverian, and the last Hanoverian monarch was Queen Victoria herself. You have the Elbe River, which is important, Hamburg lying upon it. Lübeck, an incredibly important city, as a port city in the north of Germany. Moving farther south, you have Leipzig, Dresden, which Slaughterhouse 5 is an account with Billy Pilgrim about firebombing of Dresden in World War II. But at any rate, down here in the south, you have Bavaria, the capital of Bavaria being that of Munich. Please be aware of the Ruhr Valley, R-U-R-H or R-H-U-R. I forget exactly how to spell it, but an incredibly important industrial area. So much of a history with Germany that one needs to know. It's, of course, unification under Otto von Bismarck in the 1870s, but nevertheless, so much more that I can go over with time not allowing. Also, Nuremberg comes up quite a bit as a answer line due to the fact that after World War II, they had the war crimes tribunals for the various different Nazis that had committed such crimes, but it also usually has the clues concerning Leni Riefenstahl, that German movie maker who was a propagandist for the Germans in the 1936 Berlin Olympics. She was the one that made so many movies trying to glorify the German athletes in the Aryan race. But nevertheless, triumph of the will, also with the Nuremberg rallies that occurred previous to World War II. So a rich answer line. Go and look up Nuremberg. It's incredibly important. So that's where we'll stop it for now, due to the fact that, like I said, there's so much to say for you. We just don't have time to necessarily go through it all. So we'll make another establishment or installment in just a moment.